Welcome back to another episode of Your Hope-Filled Perspective, where it's always our goal to restore hope, renew minds, and empower listeners to live in their God-given identity. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Bengtson, and back with me is my husband, Scott. Welcome back to the show, Scott.
Well, thank you, Dr. B. I sure appreciate every time you invite me here.
My listeners have let me know that they enjoy the episodes where you're co-hosting with me, so
Well, then let me say thank you, listeners.
Today is our part 2 of our anniversary episodes. We've been podcasting for over a year, and we wanted to bring something special to you for our anniversary episodes. And as we were thinking about what to do that, we decided to have an episode to talk a little bit more in depth about each word in the title, Your Hope-Filled Perspective. And today, we're going to be talking about hope, one of my favorite topics.
Oh, it sure is. And you've got a favorite quote. A quote from Emil Brunner, who said that what oxygen is to the lungs, so is hope to the meaning of life.
I think that's really crucial because we need oxygen to breathe. But to really live in the fullness of life that God intended, we have to have hope. There's a couple different definitions of hope, though. I was recently talking to a friend, and she shared with me that there are 2 different definitions. One definition of hope.
This is from the Bible.
Yes.
Right? The way the Bible uses
it is.
Right.
Absolutely. And one way that the Bible uses the word hope is kind of akin to what we would consider wishful thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know if it's going to happen or not. I hope it doesn't snow tomorrow. I hope we get rain. That kind of thing. But the second definition of hope that I really love refers to 100% confidence that something's going to happen. And that refers to the hope that we have in God.
Now, hope has played a big part in your life.
Yes.
In fact, it was a major theme of your first book, Hope Prevails.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about where that came from?
That phrase, hope prevails, came to me actually when I was at a writer's conference, long before I knew that I was going to write a book on depression. I was at a pre-conference session, and I remember the instructor of that session said, I want you just to leave this room, go spend about 10 minutes, and just ask the Lord what he wants you to know. So I did that. I went, it was a beautiful setting. I went outside, and I just prayed, Lord, what do you have for me? What do you want me to know? And I heard 2 words, hope prevails. Now, leading up to this conference, Scott, you will remember this because I had planned to have a proposal ready, 5 sample chapters. I was going to present to editors and agents, and I actually called you from the DFW airport.
I remember that.
Sobbing, apologizing because I didn't know why I was going to this writer's conference. I wasn't prepared. I did not have the proposal written. I had no sample chapters. I didn't know why I was going. And so I apologized to you for wasting our family resources, time away from home. And you said, go, see what God has for you there. And I remember after getting off the phone with you, I prayed and I said, Lord, I'm so sorry. I'm unprepared. I don't know why I'm going to this conference. But then I went to that pre-conference session and she said, just pray, see what the Lord has for you. And he gave me hope prevails. And I remember thinking at the time, oh, Lord, that's so sweet. Thank you. Of course, hope prevails. It always prevails in you. Little did I know, though, that at that conference, I would have a chance to talk to dozens of editors and agents. And the Lord surprisingly had me talk about depression. That was not the book I was planning on writing the proposal for. And every editor and agent that I talked to said, when you write that proposal, I want you to send it to me. I'm interested. And I came home, and 2 weeks to the day after I said, okay, Lord, I'll write that book, I became deathly ill. And that began more than a 5-month journey. You remember it well, where I was on medically mandated bed rest for 5 months. I couldn't work. I couldn't be the doctor. I was in pain. I was kept alive on IV hydration and nutrition. I went from 113 pounds down to a skeletal 74. And that's when I really started to understand that at least half of our battle is a spiritual battle. And I had to dig deep and determine where my hope came from. And that ended up being the title of my first book.
Mm.
So hope has played a significant role, not only in my life, but in our ministry. Everything comes back to, where is your hope founded?
Well, you've got a personal experience with hope, which is wonderful. I think it gives you a vivid and great testimony to share, and you explain it very well. But when you asked me to be on this episode, I kind of had to swallow hard and go, oh, well, how would I even define hope? That's one of those things that in our culture is sort of vague and sort of always in the background.
Yeah.
We have a holiday for Thanksgiving, and we have a holiday for Christmas, which is about joy. We have MLK Day, which is about justice, and July 4th, which is about freedom. But there's nothing that's explicitly about hope. So I went and I did a little bit of research. And while I didn't come up with an explicit definition, I came across this illustration, which I thought was a wonderful explanation of the difference between hope and faith.
That's a different take on it.
Yes.
Okay, so what did you find?
So here's the illustration. If parents tell a 6-year-old child that they are going to take that child to Disney World in a month, faith is the quiet confidence that the child has that the parents are telling the truth. He's certain that this is going to happen. However, hope is the expectation that has that child bouncing off the walls for the next month.
So is hope then the outcome of faith?
Good question. Very close to that. Hope is certainly based on faith. If you don't have that confidence to start with, you don't have hope. There's nothing to hope in. There's no reason to trust that that expectation you have is going to come to pass.
So going back to when I talked about the two different definitions of hope in the Bible, that second definition, which is the 100% confidence that we have that something's going to happen, that's the outcome of first having faith.
Yes.
Is hope then our outward expression of faith?
Yes, I think that's a good way to understand it. And the Bible, these two concepts are very close. And the Bible sometimes uses the same word that's translated either faith or hope based on context.
Well, then let's talk for a couple minutes about what are the characteristics of hope.
Oh, there's so many. And this is rich. When I started to think about this, I realized, this isn't just some vague thing. It's powerful. And there's a lot to it. First of all, hope is forward-looking. It's not looking at what's happening today, the circumstances that we're living in, which maybe is a good thing. It's very future-oriented.
So when you talk about that, it makes me think about how so often we talk about what promises are you standing on? What promises are you believing from Scripture that God is going to bring to pass? That is forward looking.
Yes.
Waiting with expectation that God is going to do something.
Yes. And one of them that I'll throw out for you right now is from Psalm 31, where David in the Psalms links hope to courage and strength from God. So he's got something to look forward to there, active in his life.
That God is going to do something, provide something.
Yes.
Okay.
The second characteristic of hope that I came across was a sense of positiveness.
You are good at that one.
Oh, well, thank you.
I think you are one of the most positive, optimistic people I've ever met.
Thank you. Of course, this is a characteristic that most people would go, well, of course, hope is positive. But if you contrast this with something like fear, fear is very negative.
Yes.
And actually, fear and hope have a lot of parallels when you look at their characteristics. But hope is positive looking. Hope is also very expectant. It's looking for something that has been longed for, like the child who's looking forward for the Disney visit. He is waiting for that visit. He's got something out there that's the terminus of his hope.
And like I mentioned, it's expectant that God will fulfill his promises. Whether we're talking about believing and hoping and expecting that God will provide or that he will heal, that's that expectancy that God's going to do what he says he will do.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, hope requires patience.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm not sure I want to go there. I'm not sure. You didn't warn me about that one. That would not be one of my strengths.
I snuck that one.
I'm very hopeful. I'm not always very patient.
Well, I think this is why hope can be difficult for people, because it requires a sense of waiting. We see this in the Bible, where David, even as he's hopeful, he cries out, "How long, O Lord? Do I have to wait for your deliverance, for your promise, for this thing that I am expecting?" And Job the same way. And Jeremiah used the word hope. And he was a prophet of lamentation. So,
okay, now I feel like I'm in good company.
Yeah, oh, yes, you
because
are.
there have been some things that I have been waiting for a very long time.
Yes.
Not that I've been waiting patiently, but I have been waiting.
Yes. So, along with patience, hope requires or is focused on sufficiency and abundance. It is thinking about and anticipating something that comes from God's goodness and God's ability to provide. And here we have another parallel to fear, because fear is focused on insufficiency and inadequacy.
Yes. Yes.
So we see there's kind of a bipolar difference here between the two.
Fear is often based on lack.
Lack, yes.
And a scarcity mindset. Yet when we recognize that we serve a God of abundance, I frequently say, God not only owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, he owns all the hills. So God has everything that we would need. But when we forget that, or when we rely on our own ability to provide for ourselves, that often leads into fear.
Yes.
But when we believe that God is who he says he is and will do what he says he will do, we can have hope.
Now, I'll give you a reference for this. Paul in Romans 5 talked about the abundance and the fulfilling nature of hope. So that this comes from Paul too. Now, there's one more I want to leave you with, and this is the one that just struck me between the eyes when it came to me. And
that is that
hope is active. We don't understand that in our culture, but hope is tremendously active. Think back to the illustration we had of the child in the Disney World visit. Once the child gets the promise from the parent, what is he going to spend the next 30 days doing?
Watching every Disney movie.
Drawing pictures of Cinderella's castle.
Putting things in his suitcase.
Talking to his parents about what it was like when they went to Disney World as children. Talking to his peers. Coming up with specific things that he is certain is going to happen.
Or she.
During this trip. He is going to be investing a lot of mental energy and time into anticipating this, into being actively hopeful.
So hope is active.
Hope is active.
And it requires preparation.
Yes. Yes, it does.
Okay. So how do we put that to play in our current lives?
Well, good question. It's something that we have to intentionally do. The child just
so it's
falls
not just going to happen.
No. It's not as easy as getting a promise to go to Disney World, right?
Okay.
Because the child just falls into that anticipation without thinking about it.
Okay.
However, the child starts with a very positive expectation. If we understand the positiveness that we can expect from God, his goodness, his faithfulness, his patience with us, his gifts to us.
Is trustworthiness.
Is trustworthiness, is righteousness, is justice. All of these things are unconditionally positive. We have an expectancy that goes beyond what we can really even get our hands around.
So before we wrap up this episode, let's stop right here and take a real short commercial break.
Oh, I'm sorry, I got so excited, I totally forgot about those.
Hey, I'm never going to fault us for talking too much about hope, but let's stop here, take a commercial break. Then when we come back, let's just touch briefly on the difference between hope and fear and how they are parallels.
Sure, yes.
All right, listeners, we'll be right back with more of your hope-filled perspective. Welcome back to your hope-filled perspective, where today we are talking about my favorite topic. That would be hope. Before the break, though, we were talking about the characteristics of hope, how we recognize it, the different definitions of hope. But you mentioned something that is important for us to talk about, and that is how hope is closely paralleled with fear. Yes. Let's unpack that a little bit more.
Well, we talked about how hope is forward-looking. Fear also is forward-looking. You don't have fear for what has happened yesterday. You have fear for what may happen tomorrow.
So hope is forward-looking, but it's positive.
It's positive, yes.
Fear is forward-looking, but it is negative.
But it is negative.
It is anticipating the negative things that may or may not ever happen.
Right. And it's very expectant, like we talked about hope, being expectant for something that is longed for, that has a specific terminus in the future, like the Disney World visit.
But fear, while it's expectant, it's usually encapsulated in dread.
In dread, that's the word.
Okay.
Dread instead of longing. So you also have a parallel with hope, in that hope is very focused on sufficiency and abundance. Yet fear is focused on anxiety and worry. That's where it comes out of. It's a lack. It's an insufficiency.
So let's talk for just a minute then about how do we move from a place of worry, fear, anxiety to a place of hope?
Good question. And I think that's something that it takes an awful lot of personal working out. For me, one of the things that struck me as I was thinking through hope was the experience that comes out of the personal narratives in the Bible. We see David, we see Moses, we see Jeremiah, we see Paul in the New Testament, all of them speaking of hope, either the hope we have as believers or the hope that they personally held for the deliverance that God offered.
So really, if we want to move from a place of worry, fear, anxiety to a place of hope, it really comes back to what we are believing.
Yes, it's founded in what we believe. But it takes the next step and says, because I have this belief, therefore I can be confident that we will have deliverance in the final days, or we can see God's hand at work even in our times now.
So if we are believing the word of God, if we believe what God has already said, what he has already promised, then basically we're standing on a foundation of hope. But if we are believing that God is not enough, if we are believing that we're exempt somehow from all of his promises, if we are believing that it's really up to us, then we are looking at and behaving from a lens of fear.
Oh, yes. And really, that's a key distinction to make there, that we don't have the opportunity to just be neutral. We are either going to be hopeful or fearful.
Yes.
And the only question is, which way are we going to swing?
So if a listener is listening today and realizing that they've been looking through and believing from a lens of fear, I think one of the best ways to move from that perspective to a perspective of hope is to perhaps sit down and write all the past remembrances of where God has come through, where he has been faithful, where he has been trustworthy, and how he has gotten us through difficult circumstances in the past. Scripture says, in this world, you're going to have trials. But I love that verse because it ends with Jesus saying, but take heart, I have overcome the world. So if we are truly taking heart and believing that Jesus is going to come through, and if we look back and see where he already has come through for us, then we can maintain our hope.
I love that other verse from Revelation that talks about we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony.
Yes.
So being able to speak of the goodness of God
absolutely
brings encouragement to us in our lives, but also to other believers. And I think that the testimony of other believers can be a blessing to us as well.
Absolutely. Especially when we are in the midst of something difficult. It's a lot like you finding comfort from the stories you recounted from the scriptures. They're not fairy tales. They are written accounts of things that others have gone through and God has delivered them from, which has filled your hope tank.
Yes, hope tank. That's a good phrase. I love that. Hope tank. Good phrase.
Friends, today we've been sharing about hope, the second word in the title of your hope-filled perspective. I really hope that something we shared today gives you a thought to ponder, something new to consider, because God offers hope to all of us. My life verse has been Jeremiah 29:11, which I think sums up this episode pretty well. It says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans for a future and a hope." He's got those plans for you just like he does for Scott and I. Be willing to go to him and ask him what those plans are. Be watchful with a hopeful expectancy of what he's going to do in and through and for you in your future. As always, this has been another episode of Your Hope-Filled Perspective. Until next time, make it a hope-filled week.